Hello, and welcome to the October 2021 Special Education Committee webinar with the ISD PTSA. With me today is Dr. Dana Bailey, Assistant Superintendent of Special Services for the Issaquah School District. Welcome again, Dana.
Thank you.
This is an ongoing series of recorded webinars where we try to answer 3 to 4 questions from the community about ISD special services. Our goal is to provide ISD families with special education students a resource for answers to common issues. We always love feedback from people in our audience and are wanting to have questions from you. So if you have a question for a future webinar, please send it to special-education@issaquahptsa.org. And we also encourage you to join our Facebook group. You can find that by searching Issaquah Special Education PTSA Committee. So let's jump right in with our first question. The last couple of webinars we've done, we've talked quite a bit about recovery services. We've discussed the process for how families will access them and the school district's plan for when they're going to be available. I've received some feedback from families. They don't quite understand what it's going to look like, what types of services or assistance are going to be available. And we understand the plans are going to be individualized, but can you provide examples of what those services will be and what will be available?
Sure, thanks for asking. I think since this is something that neither families or schools have done before, it's good to just keep talking about it and be responsive as the needs change over time. So step one, all families by now should have heard from their child's case manager to set up the meeting. That was the September goal. And the meetings all should happen before the end of the first trimester or early December as a guideline. If parents know they have like a mid-December or a January standing IEP meeting and want to just roll them all in together, that's also totally fine. They just have to ask for it. When we think about recovery services, the actual extra school time or extra time outside of school to work on SDI goals, areas of disability goals, it is meant to be systematic, strategic, and intensive. So let's take reading as an example. If I had a reading goal and my team decided I was going to get 10 extra 1-hour segments of additional reading goal, and it was going to start after Thanksgiving, my reading goal or my recovery services time would be specifically tied to my reading goal, exactly what I'm working on right now. And I might have a small group, but a very small group, say 5 or less, and we'd all be working on a very similar reading goal. So it's specific, strategic, and intensive. And the goal would be to try to close the gap of what COVID caused with the long school closures, and to give the students a boost in extra instruction on exactly what they should be working on right now. So less like open-ended summer school, less like a study session, targeted intensive teaching.
Excellent, thank you. So waiting is a strong theme with many families' frustrations. We try to have sympathy because we know that teachers and staff have lots and lots of things pulling them in many different directions. But when it's your child that you're either waiting for test results or you're waiting for a revision in IEP goals, it's just very hard to wait while you feel like your child should be receiving different services and what you want them to have in order to thrive. So where can parents find, are there standard timelines that ISD follows for IEP-related issues? And what can parents do if they feel like the process is taking too long?
Sure, I certainly can relate with that feeling, and we've waited so long to get back into school, it just feels like more waiting. That said, there are very specific guidelines and dates and timelines for all practices and processes through special education. So the Issaquah goal is to be far under those end timelines, but it is absolutely not my expectation that the Issaquah School District is going to go past the guidelines. So the information is probably best found in a parent site not because the information is going to be different, but the state side is going to have a lot of teacher education language in it. So for example, from an initial evaluation, the first time a parents bring a student up and say, hey, I think there might be something here. My child's just not meeting their developmental milestones. As an example, the school district has 25 school days to decide whether or not as a team, we're going to assess the child for special education services. And then after that, and after the parent, if they decide yes, and then after the parent signs consent, there's more days where the testing, 35 more days where the testing needs to occur. So those timelines are not flexible. Maybe what's feeling a long time right now is that the Issaquah norm is way under that end target. But I would not expect any school in this district to be pushing past those expected due dates. I'm going to offer you a parent website that I know to be solid. It's on the washington.gov website where those timelines are spelled out in a way that is more family friendly than school person friendly. And I hear you when you say it feels like we're doing a lot of waiting, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. So if parents feel like the process is taking too long, what is their first step? How do they kind of try to resolve that feeling for themselves?
Sure. I think a very good first step would be go back to the person that you most recently spoke to and say, can I have an update on my timelines? That might help you know where you are in, say, the first 60 days. And the person that you most recently talked to, if it was an evaluation, is most likely the school psych. If it was an IEP amendment, it would most likely be the child's case manager. And if you don't know who that person is, or if they've changed jobs and you don't know carryover from last June to now, I'd go back to the principal and say, hey, I know it's not you that I need to talk to, but I need to talk to somebody about the timeline for this thing, and they should be able to direct you.
Excellent. So for the next, I've received some feedback that some IEP services have not been available just due to some staff shortages. So for example, if a therapist position is open and services might not be available for a period of time, or if a teacher is absent for a couple of days and a sub isn't available, is there a process for documenting services that are missed? And how are those services made up if they're not able to have them on a regular time?
Sure. I would say to start with, not in the order of the way you asked it, but there is no real bright line on the number of, say, speech services that were missed before an action is taken. People are absent, and they're not really short-term subs for ESA or therapist positions because they're so specially trained. That said, if it's a longer amount of time, like say, a couple of weeks where a person is absent, it is our job as the school district to be doing something about that. And we did have a staff shortage. Actually, probably lots of companies had staff shortages as we were coming back from COVID, but I believe those are all filled now. And if it was a long opening of an unfilled position, our team will be reaching out to families to say, here's our plan. Here's our plan to fix this missed speech services that went over a period of weeks. And from a standpoint of how parents would know, I think that has illuminated a place where we don't have a crystal clear plan. I've not given crystal clear directions to the people in the buildings, and that's definitely a place I can work on to make sure that people have a circular communication to say, okay, this was missed this many times. This is our plan for remedying that situation.
So kind of along the same vein, we've all obviously experienced a big transition going back to classrooms, and for many students that's been kind of a rough time, and then the teachers are also getting to know each individual student and their families. There's just been a lot of change in the last year, and families sometimes when there's communication coming back, they'll get direct information only when something bad happens, if there's a negative situation. And sometimes it feels like the burden of finding a solution is placed on the family. Just wondering if ISD could promote more of a strength and solutions-based approach to communication with families. And is there anything that you're working on to improve the connections with families?
Sure. I think in times such as now where a lot of people are stretched really thin and many things are up in the air, people lose their excellent communication skills. So we would know as grown people that no one likes to get just the bad news all the time. I don't think there's a single parent anywhere that just wants to get the bad news all the time. That said, as a building principal, sometimes it's hard to remember to carve out the time to make those phone calls. As a classroom teacher, not really sure if they have, that on the front of their September mind either. I would absolutely promise you that I will bring that up and push out the, remember this is part of good communication, to start with something that is positive and then ask help rather than have the listening person say, well, you're wanting me to fix this problem. That the school person would say, tell us how you might handle this if it happened at home. Tell us what you've worked, tell us what you've tried at home that has worked, or even better yet, tell us what you've tried at home for this situation that hasn't worked, so we don't need to try that either. And I think just working together, I do think that our community is in struggle. In addition to the things you mentioned about our long school closures and the rough getting back to school, lots of families have had students home for a long quarantine. So of the 4 or 5 weeks that school's been open, we've had a lot of families whose kids have also been home for 2 of those weeks. So it's really important to ask for what you need. And I think as a parent and as a school person, if you said to me, Dana, you haven't said one nice thing about my child in this conversation, I would hear you when you say that. I'm like, okay, I hear you. Yeah. On a standpoint about a stronger communication plan as a special education department, we have heard over the past 2 years and before COVID that the IEP meeting itself, the standard, regular IEP annual meeting, does not always feel to parents like it is a collaborative event, that it sometimes has felt that the school definitely outnumbers the parents in that meeting because there's many school people who come, but also that the communication is a little bit directed. And that's really important to me and to our department. And so we are proposing to you and to the special education parent community that we open up some listening sessions where we can really open the door to say, this is what we've heard. I'm sure there's more to it. We'd like to know more specifics about it and have some listening sessions about how Issaquah School District runs the IEP meetings themselves and build to our goal, which is true and complete collaboration with parents. We're not really looking for parents to come in and rubber stamp IEPs either, but a real collaborative sense. And if the feedback that we've gotten, even if it's just some feedback, is that it doesn't feel that way to parents, we would like to address that. So that's my proposal, is that we open up some listening sessions to talk about first the IEP meeting, the actual meeting day, how that feels to parents and how we can improve and move towards our goal of genuine and total collaboration.
That sounds fantastic. I certainly would look forward to working with the administration and helping to set up those dates. And I think a lot of our families would welcome the opportunity to provide that feedback and see if we can improve that process. And I think if we improve that process, then the larger communication issues kind of might follow along well with circular communication versus just kind of back and forth. It would be stronger all around for the community.
Well, I appreciate you being open-minded to have that discussion with us. I'll give you some dates and we'll get some parent groups together. That'd be great. Looking
forward to it. So that's all I have for today. Lots of big topics that we'll have to come back in later webinars and see how we're tracking and see how we're making improvements. So I'm looking forward to talking more. I want to thank you for joining us and thank you for everyone who is listening and paying attention. We hope the information that has been provided has been helpful. Again, we always encourage people to suggest questions for future webinars, and those questions can be emailed to special-education@issaquahptsa.org. And we also encourage everyone to join our Facebook group, which can be found at Issaquah Special Education PTSA Committee. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.